Hey everybody, Quantum here, and in this video I wanted to bring you something a little unique in an Amber Sapphire aggro-oriented strategy focused around a new archetype we got in Azurite C, the Chip and Dale cards. So if you followed me for a while, you know that we attempted, and actually I would say did successfully make a tempo-oriented aggro strategy that was kind of not maybe top tier, but definitely decent enough in set 5 because we wanted to ramp with, like Mickey Mouse, Tipo, Donald Duck into a turn 7 play on turn 5, which we definitely were able to do, putting things down like Surfer Stitch and Hades in order to just tempo aggro out, if that makes sense, our opponent. Now, again, a deck like this is going to have its deficiencies, and you're basically, as an aggro strategy, trying to outrace your opponent in almost every scenario. So what we're going to do here is quickly break down this deck list. Unfortunately, Inktable is not loading the new Chip and Dale cards, so I can't show you any like simulation lines. And I haven't actually tested this in actual matches yet. So again, this is not necessarily a straight up, meta relevant top tier deck by any means. It's more of a fun deck, but it can definitely do some work because I've tested this deck even without the Chip and Dale inning table, and I've been able to get under things like Ruby Sapphire Control, Sapphire Steel, and even keep toe and beat out Emerald Amethyst, all while on the draw. But again, those are just simulations. So let's go ahead and jump straight in. We're on 12 1-drops for Daisy Duck, for Kita, and for Nala. We're on 3 Lilo. I don't think you necessarily need to play 4. Just getting one of these in rotation is good enough, and there's a couple of ways we can do that. Obviously, hard drawing it or milling it with something like the new Dale, which we'll cover in just a bit. We've got 4 Piglets. This is arguably your best 2-drop because it's usually going to quest for 3 on turn 3, and hopefully it will survive. But even if it doesn't, you've got some beefier characters that you can rely on later on. Anna is one of the reasons why we've chosen Sapphire to pair with the Chip and Dale Amber cards because, if you haven't noticed, the ink colors here were on primarily Amber and 50 and only 12 Sapphire. And you might be thinking, well, wouldn't it be better to pair this with another color? Well, not necessarily, because some of the Sapphire firepower that you get, even though it's only 12 cards, is pretty significant. And yeah, by the way, only 13 on inkables and 49 inkable cards and a straight 62 characters. The 61 and 62nd card is 2 copies of Uninkable Hiram, the new 2-cost Uninkable 0-2 that quests for 3. You can definitely cut this if you want, but I just think it's nice to have an alternative guaranteed 3 lore because of the Chip and Dale card, which again we'll cover in just a bit. The Piglet is nice because it is inkable, but having a couple of these as a guaranteed 3 lore is always good. Of course, the 0 strength is a bit of a liability, but there are ways to mitigate that. We can cover that in just a bit. Next up, we've got the Chip. This is a Friend Indeed. 3-cost inkable 3/3 character that has the same effect as the Donald Duck Bodyguard. Just instead of 2 strength, you got 3. When you play this character, chosen character gets +1 lore this turn. So a very nice and easy curve out. And also, this is a hero, as is the Dale. So the only non-heroes that you basically play are Daisy, Nala, and the Hiram. So everything else that you play, you have a very high chance between turns 1 and 3, if you drop Anna on 2, that your Anna will be able to proc with the extra lore, and then she basically becomes a 1/4 body, which is what Daisy Duck is, that quest for 2, without the drawback of Daisy, and she's inkable as well if you don't need to play her, if you'd rather play like Piglet or Hiram. But the Anna represents really good value. The Dale card here is a 3-cost inkable 3/4 body that quests for 2. When this character enters play, unless you have a character named Chip in play, it will come in exerted, and that's fine. Even on 3 costs, this will trade out positively with a Mimfox, and your Mimfox has to bounce something, so they lose tempo and they trade out your Dale if that is the case. And if this does survive and readies up, well, it will quest for 2 to 4 to however much until your opponent decides to take it out. Now, the new Alice is another one of those very important Sapphire cards, so this is your other 3-drop in addition to the Chip and the Dale separately, and it's another hero, but it does quest for 2, and of course, if you watch my videos, you know what this does, because we've covered this in our Sapphire Steel aggro deck as well, that when it quests, you can give another character of yours +1 lore, and it gains ward. So when this thing will quest, it will be on your turn 4, which is actually really relevant here. So depending on what you play on 1 or 2, right, whatever ends up surviving, hopefully, your Alice, when it quests, can give, let's say, Hiram an extra lore and ward. So you may want to play Hiram, and then depending on what your opponent has, you don't quest, or play Piglet and you don't quest. You're like, okay, yeah, like I don't want to get challenged out. You drop Alice, you're able to play a slower game at the beginning. And the reason why you would want to do this and wait is you quest with Alice, you quest with Piglet, right? Piglet will probably quest for then 4, the Alice for 2, that's 6. And then on your turn 4, what you decide to drop is something like a Sven, which is a 4-cost inkable 3/3 body that quests for 2, so really good stats right there. When you play this character, you may ready a chosen character. They can't quest or challenge for the rest of this turn. So by questing with the Alice and the Piglet for 6, you're able to then drop Sven on 4, ready up the Piglet, and that represents another 3 lore next turn most likely. And if your Alice can live, because she does have 4 toughness, which is decent enough, you can do the whole combo again, right? Depending on, again, the matchups that you're going to go up against. The other card, moving on to our 4-cost curve now, is another Dale, which, 4-cost inkable 3/4, so the same as the other Dale in terms of stats, but costs 1 more and quest for 1 less. So why would you play this? Well, this is the name Dale, which is relevant for the shift lines that we're going to go over in just a bit, but also it has a very nice ability that says when you play this character, you may put the top 3 cards of your deck into your discard to give another chosen character, or not even another, just a chosen character can give itself, I guess, if you really want it, -3 until the start of your next turn. This is one of your only ways to deal with opponent's threats without losing your board when challenging into it, right? So you can reduce something by 3 strength, take some of your characters or one of your characters, run it into it, and then you out a threat on the opponent's board. This is particularly useful in like aggro mirror matches, because being able to like zero out, let's say, a goat, or, I mean, you can't really challenge evasive, so like zeroing out a genie and stuff doesn't really matter. But there's a lot that you can zero out and just, gain a little bit of board presence, board advantage over your opponent at the cost of questing for lore, which you'd have to make the determination if it's worth it. Just the sheer fact that it mills 3 is actually relevant. You can mill stuff like a Lilo, but putting cards into the discard is actually really useful. My Yu-Gi-Oh players would know the most powerful archetype of all time in 25 years of Yu-Gi-Oh is Tearlaments, and they had to ban that into the ground as it was the most powerful milling strategy that just dominated the game, right? Milling is scary. I don't know what they're going to do for milling in Lorcana, but already, you can play a card like this with the old Chernobog, to help just speed Chernobog to get it out faster. You can play a card like this for any of the revive cards, right? Like Snow White, Perdita, and the new Chippendale, which we'll cover in just a second. So yeah, milling and recursion is very scary. For Rapunzel, nothing to really explain here. This card synergizes decently well. Another reason why it pairs well with Sapphire. Your Alice is, X4, so it can take up to 3 damage, which is where Rapunzel maxes out at to draw 3. Your Dale here is also X4, your Anna is X4, your Daisy Duck and your Nala are X4. So these are all really great targets to just get 3 damage onto, 2 or 3 damage. Heal with the Rapunzel, get your card draw if you need it. The Kita, as I've already mentioned, is basically a turn skip, right? You drop this usually on shift. Your opponent entire board is likely zeroed out at that point, and they can't deal with your board through challenging. And if they can and your board survives, that just means, again, you turn skip them, and you're going to be able to quest again next turn, and you're likely going to out aggro them as well, which is nice. For Mufasa, so I did try to build this deck a few different ways, but in the end I settled for going the all character route. I just don't think going for some ramp options and stuff really facilitates the game plan of this deck, which is really just trying to outrace your opponent. Like I said, there's going to be really bad matchups that this deck has, like into Diablo, into once you get to the mid to end game points of Ruby decks, and specifically Ruby Sapphire. You just have to try to outrace them. Hopefully you do enough in the early part of the game that you just need very little to close the game out with. And, Mufasa being a sticky card in the mid game can be very, very beneficial to help you do that. Because even hitting some of these 1-drops are actually not that bad. Depending on the scenario and the board state, if I hit a Nala or a Daisy Duck, that's not necessarily all that bad. I hit a Lilo, not that bad. And the nice thing is you have very few bad targets, really. Because again, the Anna, the Daisy Duck, the Nala, the Alice, the Chip, and the Dale all likely survive, as they're pretty beefy targets in terms of their willpower. So Mufasa putting these in exerted, your opponent has to have another strong character in order to out them, which is nice. Speaking of all that willpower and using Rapunzel to heal them, having Mufasa enabling them to likely survive if he hits off of them, Baymax is one of the other key reasons why you would want to play this in or play this kind of deck with Sapphire as with Amber, because this now represents a very strong alternative win condition. And again, the fact that you play a lot of high willpower characters, you can crash Nala for up to 3 damage, drop this Baymax, heal 2, gain 2, quest next turn if the Nala is able to survive, gain 3, right? 2 off the quest, 1 off the additional heal. Like, there's so many different things where this card can just help you clutch out the match. Once you drop this, you should be winning the game within the next turn, right? You drop this, you gain your lore. If you don't win there, it's like, I just need, this thing to survive, and I'm going to be able to quest for game next turn or challenging quest. Yeah, a really decent card, I think, and making its way into this aggro list is fully warranted. It's also cool to kind of just like hit this off of Mufasa, heal one of your characters as well, which is kind of cool, and potentially win on your opponent's turn, which I don't even know if that's happened yet in Lorcana. That's possible. 2 Surfer Stitch as an alternative draw engine to Rapunzel. Again, hopefully you hit them off Mufasa when you have characters on board, but mostly ink. But when you do have the ability to play it, this card is a tank. 4/8 body, quest for 2, draw 2. It's a very good card. It continues to be. That massive willpower stat, the decent strength stat, gets around pretty much everything in the game. Doesn't get checked by Maui, doesn't get checked by Medusa, right? Needs ice blocks and stuff in order to be checked. So very, very strong card. Very tough to deal with when it hits the board for sure. And then the whole thing the deck is based around, the Chippendale, Recovery Rangers, 8 cost on Inkable, which is terrible. 6/6 body, not bad. Quest for 3, okay. So, not bad stats. Wish it was Inkable though, but not that bad. The big thing is that it shifts for 5, and you play a lot of Chippendale targets because it can shift onto either of them. I had these maxed out, and then I opted to change around some ratios, etc. But you have 10 Chippendale cards, so that's a pretty high likelihood that you will see one of them when you see this. And this being able to shift for 5, considering that you play Chippendale on 3 and or 4, is really strong. Because whenever you ink, and I was trying to play this strategy with like double ink and stuff like that, but it just seemed a little counterintuitive. Like, I wouldn't want to play Greatstone Dragon because that inks from my discard, and I want to bring back characters from my discard, right? I don't want to necessarily fishbone those characters to get the extra ink, because then I'm just, it's contingent upon me having a bunch of characters in the discard to continually bring back so I can continue to ink, and then that's a bit of a tempo disruptor. So in the end, I just decided to say, you know what, let me just ink once per turn. No ramp here, and just get my 1 character back. That's good enough. If Mufasa hits this, it's also very good, right? Being a 6/6 body that you're going to be able to quest for 3 with next turn, that you're going to be able to ink a card on your turn and then recur that Mufasa that just got KO'd and replay that move. Like, you can already see there's a lot that you can do here. Recur Rapunzel, recur Baymax for that closeout option, for that draw option, recur Surfer Stitch for that redraw option, recur the Kita for the turn skip, air quotes, the Sven to ready up a big threat, right? Recur your aggro threats like Hiram, like Piglet, like Daisy. You shouldn't need to recur the Lilo, right? Because it can do that itself. But even Alice, right? Drop Alice, quest with Alice, give Chippendale ward, right? Now this thing is really tough to out. You basically need to be prepared. It does get checked by Maui, so fair enough. But very, very strong card. You can already see kind of what we're going for here. Again, in testing on Inktable, this card is not available, I guess. But I did test it even without this. And going second, the play patterns that you can execute with this deck allow you to get under control decks. Again, take it with a grain of salt. I have not actually tested this against people yet, but against the CPU, which can play like aggro decks decently well, it can outrace Emerald Amethyst to a certain degree. It can definitely outrace Ruby Sapphire, and even on the draw. It can deal with Sapphire Steel, because this deck is very easy to pilot. Like, you always will, likely will always be able to play on curve, whereas these other decks, all it takes is for them to not optimally play a turn, like miss a 2-drop or something, and you just get that much farther ahead because you just develop more threats. Your threats are not threatened themselves. So yeah, really interesting deck. Again, worth testing out probably, but let me know what you think in the comment section below if you made it this far. Thank you again for watching. Quantum is out.